Hey everyone, I'm Kloo, and we're back working on the project. So, if you've seen one of my other videos, I implemented a trap system into Minecraft, and I've sort of refined and expanded upon the system. I've gone ahead and built everything we need for it to save the trouble of having to do it. This is probably the most tedious. There's a lot of trial and error as well as on-the-spot editing, because a few of the chains are quite long and a bit tricky to understand and sort of tinker with. But we'll leave that till the end. Might as well show off the fun part first. So in this chest, I've got a whole bunch of different items. These three columns, which have the actual items, are the different varieties of traps. So just to name a few: float, skewer, magic, and stun. Bolt, fang, fireball, poison, freeze, jump, alert, and wither. We'll only show off some of them. I'll leave some of them a bit of mystery. And then next to them, we've got a book named the same and a piece of paper named the same. So we've got three different versions of each trap, and they're a bit specific because of that. We go ahead and chuck these in item frames that I've laid out. We've got two varieties. So glow and normal. Paper goes in the normal, book goes in glow, and item goes in glow. And essentially, if we go onto the book, nothing happens. Go onto the paper, struck by lightning, and you'll notice the item frame is missing. We go onto this one, we do get struck by lightning, but if we let the fire clear, you can actually see the item frame's being left alone. So the difference between these two, what block do I want to delete? The difference between the glow item frame and the normal item frame is reusability. So this one gets deleted because they're cheap materials, both the item frame and the piece of paper. Whereas this one you could set up and... is it droppers that you can put items into item frames? Either way, I was going for a mechanic where you can set it up so it's reusable. And then as for the book's a bit special. So you actually have to trigger it with an entity. That entity being anything other than the player. So there you can see I dropped an item on it. It does get used up. But we can even spawn a zombie on top. And you get struck by lightning. Useful for creepers and different things like that. So we have a player detecting trap, entity detecting trap, and then a basic disposable trap is probably the best way to put it. And that goes for each one of these. So the item is always player specific, and that will be very useful for things like this jump. If you go ahead and put a rabbit foot in, what it actually does is makes you jump. So I just have levitate on a single second, which allows you to bounce about pretty quickly. It's a rough balance. I think I have it set to 6. I don't know if I can open the inventory quick enough. But yeah, so 6. That does do, I think it's half a heart of damage. You can set much higher and you can obviously go much quicker and much higher, but then you take more falling damage. So it's a bit of a tinker to find a nice balance where you can improve upon your jump. I think it's, what was that, 6 blocks high? It does allow you to get from one place to the other. You could stack them on top of each other to sort of chain it. Yeah, what blocks could you go through? Sure, there's a way to tinker with it. And that's the whole idea of these systems, is people to play around with and expand upon them as if they were a normal Minecraft mechanic. So I'm sure they'd be useful in farms, especially ones like, where is it? Skewer the Nautilus shell. Just use paper. Work this up back. So skewer. Someone's a trident. Don't worry, you can't pick it up, so it's not an easy farm. But it does do a lot more damage than anything else. Doesn't quite kill him, but you could set up a few of them, especially with the glow. Try to replace them. Right, we'll put everything back for now. And we'll probably move on to the commands. I wonder if you can sort of guess some of these other ones before we move on. I think there's some fun mechanics in here that can really be used in a wide variety of different things. But as for the command, so each item frame is separated. So I'll just grab a marking block. So that's one chain, and that's one chain. So each of the 4 are for the glow item frames, and then this single 3 is a bit simpler, because at the end of it, all we have to do is kill the entity. These ones we have to sort of tinker with the data command. But we'll go through bottom one, simplest first. So I'll put them in chat. Hopefully my timer doesn't mess things up. I'll move up slowly, but we should be fine for now. So simply, first off, we have to detect the item frame, and more specifically, the item within the item frame being paper and named bolt, and then if an entity is within that block. So I've got as 0.5, which is essentially, you think, this little square. So one hole would be the whole block. Actually, I think it's slightly out because the axis is a bit skewed. And then 2 blocks would be a cube, and so forth and so on. So I have it set so they have to be directly on the trap. I think you might be able to sneak past. We sort of just... Yeah, so it's about the item frame size, it looks like. So you could get away with corners. But anyway. And then the next command is what actually triggers the effect. So if that was successful in detecting, it adds a tag to the item frame just to tell me whether or not to activate it. And then if it detects that it's activated, it's going to execute another command at its location, that being summon, in this case lightning bolt. Again, you can interchange these quite easily for effect or give different things just to do different things. And then to clean it all up, we have the kill command. So it kills the item frame. This is where the tag is really important, because it makes sure that this command only targets the ones that have been activated and not just every item frame out in the world. So it means you can set up a large array of the traps and be fine that only the ones that have actually gone off get deleted. So there's commands. Again, I'll put them in the description, possibly the comment section. These ones are a bit harder to break down. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. We'll move on to the more difficult ones. So we'll go with the play detection first. Again, we'll just chuck them all in chat. So this is very similar at the start. So again, it's executing at the item frame, in this case glow item frame, looking for the lightning rod item with the display name bolts. And then if an entity, in this case we only have it set to P, which is players, in this case nearest player, that way it limits to 1, is it within that distance, and it's going to add a tag again. So next, it looks for that activated tag, and then executes a command, in this case run summon lightning bolt again. And then here is the big change. Instead of this kill command, we have data remove entity. So again, we're limiting it to the ones that have been tagged as active, and then we're removing the item ID. What that means is it just deletes the item within the item frame and not the item frame itself. So you could set up a whole bunch of these and not have to worry about replacing the item frame each time. You can just carry around a stack of items. I think it's most useful in things like the jump pads, which were one of the main features. So for instance, we could set up 2 jump pads here and there, and all we have to do... That's not going to make it. A bit iffy. Essentially, we'll talk about the timers in a second and why that happens sometimes. Pretty good if you walk. Running is the bit of a tricky. But yeah, so you could just carry around the jump rabbit feet and use your jump pads back and forth. Other than that, the command is very the same. The only difference is, again, that at P instead of at E. And I should mention with the at E, where is it here? We are limiting it to not detect, obviously, the item frame, otherwise it would instantly go off. And in this middle one, we won't look at all the commands, we'll just look at this first one again, because the others are exactly the same. We're limiting it from players, so in this case, Minecraft .player with that little exclamation mark means it won't go off if a player is detected nearby. It'll only detect other entities. I was tempted to turn off the ability to drop items, but I feel like dropping items would be a useful mechanic on, say, a server, where you could set up a bunch of traps and people are weary, they can actually just drop an item, set it off, and that way they don't actually trigger it themselves. So there's a few I think it's Alert, the one with the glowstone dust. It gives people the glow effect, so it'd be good for detecting if people have entered your bases. As for the timers, so again, we've gone off the system of using repeating and chain command blocks in mass. In fact, that's what this little stand to the side is. That's the cap, essentially, that I want to reach. I don't want to use more than this bar of repeating command blocks. So what we've had to do is use the timers from before. So on the little sidebar there, it says timer 3 seconds. So it's 60 ticks. We're spawning, I think it's every 5 ticks maybe? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so 12. Every 5 ticks, we're spawning in redstone blocks and then air to make a very quick pulse. So a repeating command block is upwards of 20 times a second. This is doing, what did I just say? 12? 12 times in 3 seconds, so 4 times a second. So it's much more limited, and obviously that's why sometimes the ticks don't work. Again, if you walk, it seems fairly consistent. If you run, you generally have a block after it, you're fine. It's sometimes where you fall outside the range that's the issue. But really, that's specific to the jump pad. The other ones work pretty good in that sense. But yeah, so this timer system, I would kind of like to swap some of them over to repeating and chain command blocks. But again, I'm worried about the lag issue. So the right-hand side is the tick lag we're looking at. Don't worry about the left-hand side. That's just loading in chunks when I look around because I have it set to 32. But yeah, so we've got set to this amount of timers. So it does cap off our secs. I might be able to put in more. Essentially what I mean by that is within the 3 seconds I have 60 ticks, and each one of those ticks I want to run a different timer so as to space out command blocks again. So in that case, this uses up 12 of the 60, plus the ones we already have. I think we're almost at a third. I don't think there's many other big systems I want to implement that use a lot. So it should be fine. I might actually be able to, at the end, run a few more to help make this more consistent, just by closing that gap between ticks. I mean, if it's, what did I say? It's every 12, it's 4 times in 20, so it's every 5 ticks. So essentially there's a break of 4 ticks where you could stand in here and not trigger it. That's a very small window, so I don't think it's a big issue. It might be on a big issue with lag, because what actually happens when the right-hand side, I can't use the mouse, when the right-hand side actually has a substantial amount of lag, it slows down the ticks in whatever tick the lag is occurring. So what that means is, say, there's a giant spike every 5th tick. That means every 5th tick actually operates slower than the other 4 ticks, and that's where we could run into the issues. If you could time the lag so that it occurs on the ticks that actually detect, so in this case every 4th tick, you'd have no issue. It's the 1 to 3 that are sort of the problem. But it should be fine. The way I have things spaced out, there's no tick lag whatsoever. And on a large server, I doubt this will have much impact. Not like it did in some of the other videos where I had repeating and chain command blocks. But other than that, less simple than those, unfortunately. But it is a very cool mechanic that I have loved to tinker and experiment with. Especially this one. Freeze is my favorite. You can just imagine, what could you cover it with? Sure, there's some blocks, even carpet maybe, where people fall into it, and then they get trapped in this block. Obviously, it doesn't affect me because I'm in creative, but I'm pretty sure in survival it slows you down. I might make it more than a 3x3 as well. It is set to keep, so you don't have to worry about block interference. So for instance, it won't delete the command block, or any blocks for instance, it'll just fill. It'd be fun in like caves. Even making a random generator to spawn these out in the world would be fun. Other than that, another system down. Making some good progress. I have some more interesting ones planned next, and we'll look forward to showing them off. Thanks for watching. Yeah.